In this lesson, we'll explore the use of Transact SQL or T-SQL to query the data warehouse in Microsoft Fabric. T-SQL is a version of SQL tailored for interaction with Microsoft SQL Server databases. It includes additional features and functionalities unique to SQL Server. T-SQL can be employed for numerous tasks, including the creation of tables, insertion of data, updating of data, deletion of data, querying of data, and execution of stored procedures. We assume that you possess a fundamental understanding of SQL and relational databases. This lesson is not intended to teach T-SQL from the ground up. Instead, we aim to demonstrate its application within the context of Microsoft Fabric. We will guide you on how to query data from both the data warehouse and lakehouse, as well as create views, store procedures, and manage tables through creation, updates, and deletions. We're going to query the data warehouse. So go to the Data Warehouse AdventureWorks data warehouse. I've already filtered on warehouses as an item here. So if yours looks like this, you can go to the filter on the warehouse, and go to the AdventureWorks data warehouse. So we'll click on here, and this will open up the SQL area. We're going to go to New SQL Query in the center of the screen. So you can go click on here, or you can go to the top and click on it there. And now you can run whatever SQL queries you want. We're going to run a basic one to identify all the fields from our customer table with just the first 10 rows, and we can explore our data. So on the left, we just have a little look in the schemas. In our DBO schema, we've got our tables. So we'll go to our table section, and these are the tables that we read in the Quickstart section. So I'm going to write select top 10 star from, and we'll bring through our customer table. So the IntelliSense brings it up for us if we click on that. Be aware that you do need to have the capitalization at the beginning of customer for it to work, and then we will run that query. And you can see it's brought through the top 10 rows from our customer table. Let's select 3 fields from the table. So we'll bring through customer ID. And if I start typing customer, I can see customer ID in the table. So I'm going to tab on that, and it brings it through. And then you can see it's got the square brackets around it. I'm going to write a comma. Then I'm going to bring through customer. And then I'm going to bring through the country region. Now, country region does need square brackets around it, otherwise you will get an error. I'll just run that so you can see. So it doesn't like that. So just make sure that you do get the square brackets around it. And you can see it's now selected those 3 fields in our data set. If you have multiple select queries, you can highlight one and run it. So I'm going to do select top 10 star from sales. I'm just going to highlight that, and it will just run that code for me. If you run both of them, it will show you the first one that you've got out of the 2. So just be aware of that behavior. If we want reminding how the model is connected, we can click on the model layout section at the top here in the ribbon. And view the default semantic model objects. So I'm already clicked on that at the bottom. Now this should be set up from the Data Warehouse Quickstart lessons, but if not, you can go to reporting in the ribbon. And you can go to manage default semantic model. So here you can choose which tables to bring through. So I've already got mine clicked, but you would just click on the tables that are relevant for your semantic model. And then you can click on confirm, and it will allow you to manage your relationships. So again, I've got mine set up, but if you want any reminding of how to set these relationships up, you can, I'll just delete this one here. So I'm going to click on this relationship and delete it. Okay, so between reseller and sales. And I know that this connects by the reseller key. So I'm going to click on reseller key, drag it over to this table. and it will bring up the new relationship window. From the sales table, we're going to choose the reseller key, which is highlighted, to the reseller, and again, that is the reseller key. We want the cardinality to be many to one. So we've got many examples of it in our sales table and one reseller key in our reseller table. And we want to make sure that that relationship is active. Click on save, and that will save that for us. So you want to make sure these relationships are set up. As a reminder, if you want to be reminded about how the relationships are set up, do go back to the Data Warehouse Quick Start section. You can edit any of these by clicking on the relationship and you'll get the setup on the right-hand side. You can open the relationship editor as well. So I can see customers are linked to sales. The customer table is linked to the sales table by the customer key. So I might want to get an idea of how much sales I've had from each customer. So I'll go back to my query and I'll join to the sales table. So I'm going to get rid of this code here. And I'm going to start joining my tables together. So I'm going to do a select top 10 star for now. I'm going to say that we are bringing that data from the customer table as we did before, and I'm going to alias it A. And then I'm going to do a left join to the sales table. So just tab that. And I know that's joined by A.customer key equals B.customer key. Now I'm going to add a bit more information. So I'm going to bring through the customer from the customer table. And if I choose that, I don't need to choose the alias. So this will work if I run that. If I then bring the sales amount through from the sales table, it's not picking anything up. IntelliSense isn't going to work. So I'm going to type it in square brackets and put the sales amount in like this. And I'm just going to run that. And that does return the correct information back for me. I'll just get rid of this alias just to see the behavior here. So it does work without the B dot, but it is good practice to put our aliases in. So just be aware of the behavior of it. It's going to prompt you for anything from that left table, but the table that's joined using this left join, it's not giving you that same IntelliSense behavior. So I'm going to do this A.customer and B.sales amounts. And then I'm actually going to sum this up. So I'm going to put a sum around it and I'm going to rename that to be total sales amount. And then in the group by, I will just group this by the customer. Okay, and then we're just going to run that. So that's working as I'm expecting it to now. So I will now get rid of this top 10 from it. So I would like to now create a view to store this customer sales query to show the amount of sales a customer has generated. So just make sure that top 10 is removed. And we're going to click on Save as View. And in order to do that, you need to actually select text of code that you want to save. So we'll do that. So just highlight this, Save as View. And you can see that the code that we've written is at the bottom. It's created this view code for us, which is really quick. And we're going to name it Customer Sales and click on OK. That's successfully saved the new view. So we can have a look on the left-hand side and you can see that the customer sales is now available in the views section. If I create a new SQL query, I can then reference that view. So I can do select star from customer sales, which is the view that I've created, and I can run that. It will take a little while because it's running all of the data. And eventually you will get all the rows with that summary for each customer of their total sales amount. Sometimes we might use temporary tables to create a script that is quite advanced, like a series of temporary tables, and update our main temp table gradually throughout the script. It's worth mentioning that you can't currently insert data into a temporary table from an existing table. For example, if I run the following code, so I'm going to get rid of what I've got on my screen and just paste this in. So if I select the product category and subcategory from my product table, I would get this. And that runs fine, and it should bring us back 397 rows of data, which is what we're getting. You can see in the corner here, got that 397. But when we try and insert the data into a temp table, so I can type into hashtag temp as I would in SQL Server, if I do that and I run that, I get an error message, and it says this: the query references an object that is not supported in distributed processing mode. According to Microsoft documentation, at the point of this recording, you can create them, but you can't insert into them. So for now, you will have to create your own table. You can see that the solution and workaround is to use regular user tables instead of temp tables. So if you're using these tables for temporary purposes, it might be worth naming them with temp at the start for transparency. For example, I'm going to create a table called temp product summary, which has the product, the total product cost, and total sales amount. And I'll run that. And you'll be able to see on the left-hand side that that table has now been created. If I run this code and highlight this, you can see that it returns the table. There is no data in there yet because we haven't inserted anything to it, but you can see it does exist. Then I'll insert some data into it. So you can see I'm inserting into the temp product summary. And in there, I'm going to take data from the product table, which I've joined to my sales table, and I'm grouping it up by product. So I'm going to sum up the total product cost, and I'm also going to sum up the sales amount. So I will now run that piece of code. That will insert all of that data into my temp product summary table, and then I'll rerun this to check that the data is there. And you can see we've got that data being returned. I might also want to create a store procedure, in this case, to use parameters for end users. So we're going to go to Store Procedures. I'm going to click on the ellipsis, New Store Procedure, and then edit it as required. I'm going to rename it as Product Summary. So we've got the first line of create proc, and it will create one called product summary for us. In the parameters area, I'll add one for at product. So it will look like this. I'm going to get rid of the ones that are already there, delete those, and I'm just going to add one called at product, which will have a varchar 50. Then I'm going to paste the code in between the begin and end sections of what we'd already created. So in here, we're going to create the table temp product summary. We're going to insert our data into it, and then we're going to select it. I need to ensure I put a drop table code snippet at the start, so I'll do that now. So after begin, we're going to add the drop table. So every time it does it, it will drop that table. You could truncate it as per sort of SQL protocol. You could truncate it instead, but we're going to drop it and we're going to recreate it, insert into it, select everything from that table. And then at the end, we're going to make sure we have that filter on where the product equals the product that people are defining. So that's our store procedure script. Then we simply run it as we would normally do in SQL Server. And you will see that it has been added to the stored procedures section on the left-hand side. So we now have one called product summary, which we have just created. To check it's running as expected, I'm going to create a new SQL query. And I'm going to run that store procedure. So we've got exec, product summary, and we need to make sure that we have a product that we're defining. So product equals. Now I'm going to choose the one that is called Road 650 Black, 48. So that's the one I'm choosing, but feel free to choose whichever you like. You can go back to our SQL script from earlier to choose any product that you wish. So we're choosing this. So exec product summary and choose the product, and then we'll run that. You can see it takes some time because it's running the query and updating the table. So running the store procedure is acting like a refresh of the dataset. You could use this methodology to create scripts for your data warehouse tables rather than the low code option we looked at earlier, and simply create a pipeline to run that store procedure rather than using SQL Server Agent in SSMS or whatever automation software you use. This enables you to use scripts and stay code-based. So you can see now that we have that data, it's returned this figure, which will match the data that we have in the query that we wrote earlier. So the 298,460 and the 310,382. You might also want to add a new schema for any tables, store procedures, or views, which is very easy to do. Simply go to the schemas, click on the ellipsis, and add new schema. So it creates the code for you. I'm going to create one called temporary. And I might do this because this is where I can store any tables that are really just used on that temporary basis. So this is kind of part of that workaround we've talked about, but you can have them for all sorts of reasons. So I'm going to run this code. And shortly you will see that in the schema section, I get one that is called temporary, which is the one we have just created. Next, I want to cover how we might insert data into the data warehouse from an external location, as we might not want to use a data flow to load data in, but rather stay using code. Now, typically, T-SQL hasn't been great at reading Excel files. We'd often use T-SQL for working with data in our databases. We could have used Open Row Set in SSMS, but there could be issues with security settings. We can use the copy into statement to read in CSV files or those in Parquet format, but it cannot be local files. As you can see from the Microsoft documentation, it has to be from an external Azure storage account. So the best thing to do for local files is to use Dataflows Gen 2, and as we've already seen, it's very easy to create them and automate them. We'll look at an example from the Microsoft site which uses copy into to load an open source COVID dataset from a public Azure storage account. Let's create a new SQL query, and we're going to create this table. We're going to create table dbo.bing COVID-19 data. And we're opening the brackets. We've got the ID. So you'll want to go through these details and write them in. We've got the ID updated, a variety of fields, then we're closing it and just creating that table. So we'll run that. And you'll be able to see in our DBO schema shortly that we now have the Bing COVID-19 data. Then we're going to update the tables using this code block, which sets the data to be read in from the second row because the first row has the field names. So underneath our create table, I'm going to paste this into. So we have got copy into. So we're going to copy into the Bing COVID-19 data. And we're going to take that from this CSV file. So you can see this link here. And then underneath that, we are going to paste this bit of code, which is with open brackets file type equals CSV, because we're reading in a CSV file, and we're taking it from the first row equals 2. As I say, because the first row has the field names. So we're going to run this code, And you will be able to see that the data has been added to the table. So once this is run, we're going to run the next bit of code, which is select star from Bing COVID-19 data, making sure we've got our brackets around it. So once that stops whirring away, it's still inserting that data in, then we will run this next bit of code. Okay, that has succeeded. So now I will run this final bit of code. And you can see that has successfully inserted data from this external storage account into a table in our data warehouse. You could then create a store procedure to load the data and then set it to refresh regularly using a data pipeline. So let's have a look at that now. Here you can see the code to create the store procedure for our COVID data. So you can see that we have created the procedure for Bing COVID-19 data, calling it store procedure at the beginning. And we're going to drop the table, we'll recreate it. This is essentially the code we've just been running, copy it into here from this external location and then end. So I will run that. Once it's run, I'm going to create a new SQL query and I'm just going to make sure it definitely does return that data. So I'm going to execute the store procedure SP Bing COVID-19 data that we've created. So it's running fine. And then we will take that and add it into a pipeline. So we're going to go to get data, new data pipeline, and we will name this to Bing COVID-19 and click on create. And as we did in the quick start section, we'll shortly get a pop-up box. We're going to close this down. We don't need this right now. Yes, cancel. And we're going to select pipeline activity. We can choose that from the center of the screen. And we can go down to stored procedure from the list. In the general tab of the stored procedure, we're going to call it Bing COVID-19. In the settings, we're going to set up the connection to be the AdventureWorks data warehouse. So I'll select that and our store procedure name will pop up. We're going to choose the Bing COVID-19 data, which we've created. Then go to validate and make sure that I was all looking okay. The pipeline has been validated, no errors were found. And if you wish to schedule this, simply add the schedule here in the ribbon. So we can click on schedule. You can save that to come on and run at a certain time. And you can go back to the quick start section to remind yourself of this as well. Or you can do this in the workspace. So we can go back to the workspace. I will go and find my data pipeline. We've got our Bing 19 and I can click on the ellipsis to schedule it here and I can set the same settings here instead. We're now going to look at how you can query the lakehouse or warehouse in SQL. So let's go back to the AdventureWorks data warehouse and we will click on new SQL query. And you can reference a lakehouse or warehouse table in this workload by referencing this three-part naming convention. It's the warehouse or the lakehouse name, dot the schema name, dot to the table name. For example, I'm going to paste some code in here. We are selecting data from the AdventureWorks lakehouse that we created earlier in the course from the DBO schema and referring to the customer table. And then we can simply do a normal select statement, so select top 10 star. I'm going to actually insert this into a new table called customers in the temporary schema that we created earlier in our data warehouse. So in a minute, we will get some data that is going to pop up in our temporary schema. Nothing there at the moment. So if I run this, we will now get a table showing. So when that, you may want to click on refresh. And you can see that the customers table has now been set up. And it exists underneath the temporary schema in a new area. So this is data that we've taken from our lakehouse and we've inserted it into our data warehouse. So this is a really powerful option for you. I'm now going to run the query to just select the data from that temporary customers table that we've created, just to show you that the data is indeed there and we do get the top 10 customers. To summarise, we've queried the data warehouse and lakehouse, created a new schema, a view and stored procedures, and created, updated and dropped tables.